Like I try to strike a balance when the obvious landmines, you should address them to the extent possible. But I like to be biased towards action. And then even if it means that to your point, you're gonna make some mistakes and gonna learn some things alongside the way.
Welcome to Secret Ops, the podcast uncovering the world of operations, one episode at a time. I'm your host, Ariana Cafone, and today's guest is Matheus Riolfi, co-founder and CEO at Tint. Now, we covered so many different topics on this episode because Matheus has so much experience across the industry in a lot of different roles and in a lot of different lenses. So we're going to go off our normal format a little bit, which is always fun. But I think it's because you're going to learn a ton, because I know I did. All right, let's jump in. Matheus, thank you so much for coming on to Secret Ops. We were just having a chat, and then I was like, we got to stop talking and start recording. This is too good. So welcome. Thanks for being here.
Thank you so much for having me. Yeah, I think it's going to be a good conversation.
I think so too, because we've got so many things to talk about. Like I said, I was looking at your background, and just to give the audience some context, because we can't put you in a bucket, is what I've learned. You have broken all sort of buckets. So a couple of things. You're a seasoned startup founder. You've been doing this for over a decade, starting and funding and scaling technical startups. So lots of good stuff to chat about there. You're also a YC Combinator alum, and you hold an MBA from Harvard Business School, which is all delicious. But then this is what struck me. So you are actually a licensed insurance broker in all 50 states of the US. And for our operators in the audience, so you were the director of international expansion at Turo, and you essentially pioneered the global expansion of their operations, designing all of the risk management at the different stages of the business. Am I missing anything in that?
No, I think that's right. The only thing I would add, like I'm Brazilian, born and raised, came to the US, 12 or 13 years ago now. And as we were talking, like on the side, I didn't leave Brazil until I was really 18. But after that, like traveling the world, moving different places, working in different places, and definitely had a global background.
Well, you currently have, an insane wealth of experience. So I guess the one thing I wanted to start with is, what do you think motivates you to follow all of these different paths?
It's a great question. I'd say a hard one, but to me, it's like really doing something and having an impact. Like, I was a consultant for 3.5 years, saw that as a way to get a toolkit and learn about business, see different industries. And while I don't regret, it was definitely a work that didn't fulfill me. Like as a consultant, you're not building, you're advising, you're helping others think through things and actually build. So I just want to build. I really have, there are many problems in the world. There are many opportunities, right? The problems can be opportunities if you do the right things. And I just like to execute and do them.
So you're a problem-driven person, meaning you want to solve these problems, you want to get in, you want to create things. How has that tied to the operational work that you've done? Because I know I love solving problems all day long. Clearly, there's a connection there. I guess, how do you think that problem-first mentality ties to operations?
The way I say is like, it starts with the problem. It starts with like, what are you trying to do? Like, why it matters, or why do you want to do something? And then the next step is like, the going back to the Y Combinator that you mentioned, like, why you? Like, why are you qualified or the best person to be tackling this specific problem? So you definitely need to match both. You need to match something that you saw an opportunity, something that you think, it's a change that is necessary in the world, with what you like, and therefore what you can do.
When it comes to YC Combinator, this is just mostly Ariana being curious. What was that process like? Where do you think that sort of fit within your career journey? What did you take from the beginning of that, and what did you take away from that journey?
Yeah, we got into Y Combinator. We were about 3 years in to Tint. So we founded the story of Tint. I was one of early employees of Turo, as you mentioned, running the international expansion. My co-founder was running all the data science and all the data side of of the business. And we saw this opportunity, and the company was offering insurance products to their customers very successfully. But we also saw how hard it was for them to figure out without help. And that was really the inspiration for us to start Tint. Is really the company we wish existed when we were building those things at Turo. So we started Tinting in 2018, and we got into YC in the winter of 21. So really about 3 years into the journey. And YC was really an acceleration for us. Like I mentioned, been doing that for a while, being, as any founders, experimenting, trial and error. And around the time we got to YC is really where the things were, the inflection point had happened. We were growing super fast, much, much faster than we were in the last 3 years. So YC was really like two things: was a stage. So it gave us a lot of visibility, both with potential customers and potential investors. And it was also a learning experience on like how to do 0 to 1 startups. So I
Right.
saw a lot of the 1 to 10 at Turo, or whatever, 1 to 30, because by the time I left Turo, or when I joined Turo, it had about 15 employees. By the time I left, they had over 400. So I saw how a company go from 1 or 5 to 30, but the 0 to 1 is a very different world. And YC gave us really a crash course on how to be better in that kind of inception and first steps and towards then the 1 to 10 journey.
Do you find also, because I feel like YC Combinator is this, I don't know, if you haven't been in it, you're like, ooh, what's this all about? And if you have been in it, it seems like a tight knit community. Was part of that also having that community of different people who've been through it, different expertises? Like, how does that piece fit into that?
The community is huge. So I would say a YC network is as strong, if not stronger, say what is an alumni network is for college, for like an university. It's like that level of collaboration, and they were able to build something very special there. So then a community, again, for us, we benefited a lot from a customer perspective. So out of our first 10 customers, I would say half of them were Y Combinator companies. So it's really helped us on getting traction on the sales perspective. We had a lot of investors that kind of came to us through Y Combinator as well. And then just being around other founders and having like side conversations, like share battle stories, is like, it's all very, very good as well. Like I still keep in touch with a few founders from my batch. Our batch was like a relatively large one. We were like 360 companies. So obviously, the same way that in undergrad or in business school, you don't become friends with everyone in your class, but there's always that group of like 5 to 10 that you really click, and then we'll continue with you, and you have like regular conversations going forward.
Yeah, I totally felt that during code school too. Like you've got this whole group of people you're learning the skill with, and then you sort of bond to that like core people that then become, weirdly enough, lifelong friends, luckily.
Yes.
Also, it's interesting, my husband owns a business, I own a business now. It can be a very like lonely journey, even if you have a co-founder involved. Because sometimes you're just doing something for the first time. So it's quite humbling. How has it been having that support with you and your co-founder and starting this business? How have you been able to, I guess, navigate the changes and doing things for the first time?
I definitely agree with the fact that it is a lonely journey, but I also agree with the fact that like the co-founder, it's very important. I do believe that, like, again, I think a co-founding relationship, it's a very important relationship, and a lot of the early stage startups, the reason why they die is because the co-founders fight, and then they're so disruptive to the business that it's really hard to recover. I'm lucky that Jerome, my co-founder, as I mentioned, not only we worked together at Turo for about 4 years, so we already knew each other, even if we never worked directly. We knew each other. We knew roughly what to expect, and that translated very well to doing something for the first time for both of us, which is starting this company in insurance, which is something that we didn't have a very deep background on, just other than our experience at Turo. So it was very good through the ups and downs. Again, Tint, when, as I mentioned, we got to YC in the third year. So it means that the first 3 years were a lot of trial and error and false steps and learning experiences. So the fact that throughout this entire process, we stay together, we stay having a great relationship. Like we help each other when one is up, the other is down, that we can kind of balance each other even emotionally. I think that support and that kind of partnership, it's no, it was mission critical for us, and I believe is mission critical for every startup.
We're in an interesting position here because I've got someone that is a seasoned founder who also is an operator in their own right. And I have a particular question for you, for the operators listening, which is, at what point should you be seriously considering bringing in an operations person within the business? So I often get that question, like, when should I bring a COO? When should I bring an operations director? Having seen it multiple times and doing it yourself and being an operator, when do you think that piece fits in or that role really becomes evident?
I'd say it's a very hard question to answer. And it's a very hard question to like know the timing, right? I think the way what I learned, and more and more, like we have about 50 people, so it's a very different world from it was when we were like, again, the first 3 years. By the time we were to YC, we were 4, so we had a long time of like very small team, and then we quickly ramped from 4 to 50 over the course, I would say 14 months or so. And it's a materially different company than it was before. And it's something I learned in this journey is that the two hats, the CEO hat and the co-founder hat, are completely different. They work well together. Obviously, a lot of the CEOs are co-founders, and COOs that can have other the exec roles. But the skill set, the interests, like are very different. And I think in the early days, I'd say the weight is 99% on the co-founder hat. And as you start growing, it starts to migrate more to the CEO hat. And the CEO hat becomes more important, which is, not to your point, is the operator part. And I think what I've seen in with many co-founders and talking with coaches and other things like that is that some people, they just don't like the operator. They are great as founders. They get things started. They get excited with innovation, but they just don't want to run a business. They don't want to do planning. They don't want to go through the process. So I think the best I'll try to answer your question is, whenever the operator is feeling that what they are doing and is required for the business, it's no longer energizing them, or it's outside their skill set. So like they're just bad in planning. They are great, like creative types. They are not good in planning. Cannot be organized. Those are, I think, the symptoms of when they're like, okay, this is either getting out of my comfort zone, or not comfort zone, because founders will always be outside the comfort zone, but it's getting out of my skill set, and I don't want to learn. It's something that doesn't energize me. It's like kind of really dragging me down. That's a good time to bring somebody, start to specialize, bring people that have that expertise, and let them go and empower them to just make sure that the company is covered, but you don't have to do it.
But that is such a beautiful answer because I've been asked that so many times. And you're right, it is so specific based on the business, what the goals are, short-term, midterm, long-term, when you really sort of can take that risk in bringing in other senior leaders or other roles or specializations.
Mm-hmm.
But I do find that a key motivator with founders in the business is if they aren't energized by it, it just sort of falls to the wayside. And so then you kind of get into these pits of, I guess, the oh shit pits where it's like, oh no, we didn't like doing this. So we didn't really think about this. And now we're at risk because we just didn't want to put energy toward it.
Yeah.
Whereas somebody like myself, like I'm not a marketing person, but man, I could totally geek out on automations and data cleanliness and all these sort of things. Like that energizes me. So that's when what you're talking about, finding those people that are energized by the things that you are not, and then having them complement your skill set so you can put your time towards something that energizes you and moves the business forward.
Yeah, and this is not only important for the business, because then I think you're going to have better skills doing what is required, but it's very important for you as a founder, as personally, because it's a hard job, right? So if you are not finding or spending a decent amount of your time in something that is energizing, it's just kind of hard to keep going. The journey is already hard enough. There'll be enough problems in front of you that will drag you down. Then you gotta keep finding and keep making sure that you are getting the energy back at all times.
Definitely. and we can't understate that. Actually, it's so important because you're in a marathon, you're not in a sprint. So this is multiple years of doing this, and if you aren't continuously energized by what you're doing, that's going to feel just so daunting. It's going to feel impossible.
Yeah, and what I like to say is that you are in a marathon, but you gonna run as fast as the best in the world, right? So I even brought that to the team. Like, so I think there's something the average they say the winner of the marathon is gonna run twice as fast as the average. So for startups, you are running a marathon, but you gotta run twice as fast as the average. You don't have all. If you just run the average, you're not gonna do anything because as a startup by definition, you are starting very small, so you are behind incumbents. You're behind like all the work you need to do. So you gotta go very fast. And but it's still a marathon, so you cannot go as fast as Bolt or like somebody that runs a 100-meter
Mhm.
sprint because that you're gonna run out of energy, but you gotta go a lot faster than the average. And I think that's something that like I hear the marathon analogy all the time, and it is true, but he hides the fact that you have to run like the first prize in the marathon, not only as the whoever is gonna finish in their weekend hobby, right?
Totally. You're balancing two really important things simultaneously, which I
Yeah,
don't think most people, when they jump into founding a business, quite get. Where you have to have the longevity and the energy to keep going the distance, but also work your tail off in the midterm or the short term to be able to get to where your competitors are or ahead of where your
yeah,
competitors are, even being
yeah,
so much smaller. That's not an easy thing to figure out, especially if it's your first time. I'm sure the more times you do it, the more the muscle that you have with it. Now, okay, if we talk about Tint and just you being a registered broker, when it comes to operations, none of the people and businesses I work with like to talk about insurance. And
yeah.
somehow you have found yourself in this part of the world and in the business industry. So why insurance? Like what is it about insurance that you saw that needed to be addressed within the market?
Yeah, so I think the interesting parts like again, as most people work in insurance, as I mentioned, I got to it as I was working at Turo, so by accident, right? Like I never knew that when I joined Turo, a tech company based in San Francisco, I would be spending any second in insurance. And as a consumer, as everybody else, I find it incredibly hard and confusing and all those things. And then something you mentioned before as an afterthought. And but then I think the insight we had, which I found very and I can talk about the data part and being a data geek and how insurance is all about data. So all those like personal sides of like why I find it intellectually very stimulating. But the consumer part and the most important why is that insurance is a very important product. Like you don't want to think about it, and frankly, you shouldn't think about it, but it's very important that you have it because if something goes wrong with your car or like when you're transporting an expensive good, whatever it can be, there's a serious financial loss on the other side. And depending on who you are, how much savings you have, like you can have a catastrophic effect in your life. So it is
Mhm.
this kind of combination of you don't care and shouldn't care, but you must have it. It's mission critical for you. So then what gets us excited is like, well, that what that means is that, and that's what we saw about what is called embedded insurance or what we did at Turo is that insurance should be a feature and not a product, right? So
Mhm.
the way you solve this conundrum is that if now the insurance becomes part of something now product and service you're using and already comes with or you can easily purchase as part of that package, then you don't have to think about it as much. Then you don't have
Mhm.
to go download an app and interact with a brand you don't want. It's just, again, going back to the tour example, you're renting a Porsche for the weekend to go to an outside Chicago to celebrate with your husband. You just see a little button to say, you want to add protection? Like if anything goes wrong, you pay $30 more. Done. Imagine if now you had to call your broker and say, hey, Mary, I need insurance for 2 days for this Porsche, but blah, blah. You don't have to, right? Going back to like it's not part of the right solution. So what get us very excited is that the way we are helping companies create their own insurance products as part of the product services, it's a much better solution for consumers. And as a consequence, more people will be covered when they need. And the companies on their side, it's very profitable. Their core business becomes better. So it's really a win-win solution.
Totally. It's interesting to me too, because I think we're like car renting is such a clear example, right? Like you need the car insurance when you rent a car. If you don't, like I didn't have a car when I lived in New York.
Uh-huh.
So what do you do in that situation? You don't have
Yeah.
inherent coverage, right? And just baking it into the product makes it easy. Where do you see that going in the future? Because car is very clear. Maybe like renting potentially is clear. Like where do you see that feature being used in the future in maybe ways that we aren't seeing today?
Yeah, so the beauty is that it's gonna happen everywhere. So despite being a relatively young company, we already have 12 or 13 different use cases running on our platform from everything from things like you mentioned, like car sharing, motorcycle sharing, to shipping, to vacation rental. So Airbnb use case, like you don't think about it, but Airbnb has 300 people that all they do is work with insurance. So you have a cover in case you rent a place, the place burns out or whatever, you break the TV. There is insurance that goes with that. So like, and every time you're transporting something, you're renting something, you are using some assets of different kinds. But we've seen use cases like legal liability. We've seen crypto. We've seen a company, it's called Citizenshipper, which transport dogs. So if you buy a dog from a breeder in New York and you want to transport to Chicago, you can get protection for like, if dog gets sick and needs a vet, that is covered. So like, again, we've seen that is happening everywhere around insurance. So we believe that, in 10 years or so, if you fast forward, the way the consumers and companies interact and consume insurance is going to be materially different. And what Tint does, we're building the infrastructure that lets this happen, like all the software, the services, the what we call capacity, or like the money that makes it all work, because it's incredibly hard. Like to do this very simple thing that is making insurance a feature of a bigger product, it is incredibly hard
Mm-hmm.
to execute, and that's kind of what we are creating.
What do you think is I mean, I'm sure there's a gazillion things that are hard about this, just having a taste of it in what I do. But what would you say is the biggest hurdle that you're trying to overcome in what you're building?
In terms of what we're building, again, is to redesign the insurance, rethink the insurance experience in the insurance product. With this idea that it's going to be a feature in mind, because really in the last 400 years, everything around insurance was designed as a standalone product. So how do we support that as a standalone product? So when we flip the logic and say, okay, now it's just a feature of what, say, you ship, one of our customers sell, you have to redo now a lot of things from scratch. And I think that to me is what's hard. And from the systems that you need to run that and keep track of who purchased what, keep track of how the money is flowing, to paying people when the claim happens and they file, and make sure that they get paid
The pieces.
quickly.
Oh,
Um,
yeah.
Getting the insurers excited and understanding how to operate in this new world is, it's whole challenge. So it's really like,
Mhm.
it's a combination of a lot of smaller pieces. And,
Mhm.
as a startup, we're building them bit by bit. So something I think we did well is like try to break it up, those 20 pieces, and start building one by one. And today we have most of them already like built or in the process
Mhm.
of being built. But that's when, again, going back to the advice for founders, is that like, it's okay to have this very big vision, and it's great. You can see the 20 pieces that need to be built, but try to get traction and try to get, figure out like, what is the one that I can try to build and sell already? Because you
Mhm.
then build the other 19 based on that momentum. If you need to have all the 20 working well from the get go, it's a lot harder to get started.
It's a lot of whiplash too for the team, right? It's like, where do they prioritize their time? Where do they prioritize their efforts? Each of those pieces that you're building is going to require a lot of different research and testing and prototyping, all of that to go into it. So how do you sort of direct not just yourself, but the whole team in one direction to sort of get the momentum moving and continue it throughout the years of building the business and your products.
Yeah, no, I absolutely, and it's a hard skill because breaking something, and founders typically are gonna, they see an opportunity, they're visionaries, they get excited about higher level concepts or like big changes in the world, things like that. But then getting and breaking that into smaller pieces that can be built is definitely a skill that I think I learned a lot in my journey. But I mean, I'm pretty sure I need to be a lot better at it.
Don't we all? My family jokes that I have to always learn things the hard way, meaning I have to fall on my face and then I learn the thing. Did you find that most of the lessons that you've learned in starting businesses and doing what you've done, is it because you sort of did the research ahead of time and you prevented a misstep, or is it because you pulled, I guess, an Ariana and you tripped and you tried something and it didn't work, and so then you're on to the next thing? I guess how much of it is reactively understanding and knowing, and how much of it is preemptively getting that
I would say
information?
I'm probably more in the middle, in a sense that,
Mm.
or more towards you, in a sense that, like, I believe, again, as founders, the being agile, being like, going out there and trying things, it's very important, because if you do say the pure market research, then like your angle that you mentioned, you're gonna get to a lot of hypotheses like, okay, this is probably gonna become a problem if I don't do something about it. But you really don't know if it becomes a problem. And oftentimes companies do build a lot to prevent this problem that never happened. Like, you were just wrong.
Mhm.
There was not a problem. And by the way, there was another problem that you didn't anticipate that is actually important and you have to go fix. So in the startup journey, there's so much you can predict, because if it was very easy to predict, like, anybody would do it, big companies would do it. Or if there was very easy to look at something and say, like, yeah, that's absolutely going to be a $10 billion opportunity. Like, most $10 billion opportunities don't look like that at the get-go. So I believe that as founders, we have to get started. We have to jump. And then, having that, sometimes a naivete can be beneficial. Because if you, like, contrast it with an expert, right? Like, you work for 40 years in this industry, you've seen everything, you just believe that nothing will work. Like, you just get in there, like, academic studies around that is like the way that experts think is not conducive to innovation, just because for the most part they know too much of what can go wrong,
Totally.
so they don't even start. So long way of saying that, like, I try to strike a balance when, like, the obvious landmines, you should address them to the extent possible, but I like to be biased towards action. And then, no, even if it means that to your point, you're gonna make some mistakes and gonna learn some things alongside the way.
It's so funny when you mentioned that, because the first thing that came to my mind was like, that's exactly how I felt about getting our dog when he was a puppy. Was like,
Yeah.
we didn't know, like, we never raised a dog, like, we got this, no problem. And then the first 6 months are just complete chaos, and it's just a complete madness. And they're biting everything and chewing everything, and you're like, oh my God, what did I get myself into? And then you get through that crazy phase and you start to get, like a callus for how to have a dog and how to do all those things. But it's kind of the same thing anytime you're jumping into something new. Is it's gonna feel chaotic. You can only prep so much. I did all the research, and then you just have to try it, and you've got to see what's going on, and you've got to be open to trying new things. And then through that process, you learn it. It's so funny how your personal life and the business world really can mimic each other, even though it feels quite different. Um, Especially on the first year of having a puppy was intense. Is there
Yeah.
a certain window, having started many businesses, that you're like, if I can get past this time frame, I think we're gonna be okay?
Uh-huh.
Is there anything consistent within the startup world? Would you say, like, hey, if we can make it past the first year, we're gonna be okay? Or is it just dependent on the business and the team and all those pieces?
Yeah, I think I wish there was, but I don't think there is. I think the reality is that the startup always gonna be like a battle. They're always gonna be existential things at each stage, or they change. Like, it's a little bit like a video game. You finish the first phase, you beat the boss of that level, you go to the next one, which is a different game, harder, different challenges. And I think to me, startups kind of keep going. If there was and we raised a very large Series A, $25 million, like a year and a half ago, and part of us thought like, yeah, oh, great. So the hardest part is behind it, and it's not really true because we have today definitely different challenges. They are now arguably more exciting because they are like related to growth, and we have more customers, we have a lot more data, more things to do than in the early days. With a lot of it was in our heads, but if you look at now, we look at was a company in logistics called Convoy. They raised like $200+ million and vanished like in a few weeks. Think about Silicon Valley Bank, which is something that a lot of founders had to deal with a few months ago. The Silicon Valley Bank is a public company, a public bank. Like, can you imagine if you're the CEO of that company? You think you made it, you're just happy and collecting your profits, and not really. Like, there's some changes in the market that can come, and you didn't plan for it, and you're out of business, you're bankrupt. So I think that I no longer tell myself that story that it's gonna be easy from here, because it's not true. And personally, that's what makes it exciting, right? I'll probably be bored if it becomes too easy.
That's true. That's true. When it comes to fundraising, I guess I want to put myself in the role of an operator. So in preparation to raise, the Series A, what do you think the role is of the operator within that? Because I think that sometimes, people listening who are operations people, I've had different experiences, right? Like, get your ducks in a row, prepare for the fundraise, get the infrastructure together, get the data together. Like, what would you say are the top, 2 or 3 things that an operator can contribute to making that fundraising process easier or faster?
I think that definitely have showing that you understand your business and you are in control of it. So I think in getting all the data ready, or knowing important metrics, I think that's the piece that comes from the kind of the bottoms up. That is, it's very important, right? You're gonna go through a diligence, so making sure that you have all the documents and the T's are crossed. They're nothing I imagine would be more annoying and frustrating that you found a great investor. You can't convince of the mission vision or the top-down part, right? It's going to be a huge market. This is our plan, and get everybody excited, just to then, fail on the due diligence because your stock documents are not in order, or there's a major liability of whatever kind that you didn't disclose or didn't know about it or was not anticipated. So I think I would think almost like a tops down versus bottom up. The bottom up, which the operator parts, is make sure you're in control, make sure that things are clean and organized. And then the top down is selling the dream, right? Selling the potential and things related to that.
That does make me think about when I'm helping businesses sort of stabilize their operations. And I'm like, we've got to centralize all of your founding documents, all of your insurance. We have to centralize all of these things. And there's usually resistance there. I think just because it's annoying and they don't see it as valuable. But like you said, you don't want to get to, the finish line and not have all your P's and Q's together. That should be the simplest part of the process, because you've been mentally preparing and, preparing your operations for that. So as much of a pain, or maybe it doesn't seem valuable at the time to do and to dig up, it's the simplest thing that you can do to actually really contribute something big at the end of the day.
Yeah, I definitely empathize with the feeling that, that doesn't seem to be, it's not fun and doesn't seem to be important until it is, right? So that's why I think that, the operators and the founders, they should have the minimum bar, and make sure that they always comply to that. I mean, of course, you shouldn't spend time as a Series A company and things we need that when I go public. Cool, that is a problem you deal down the road. But having your founding documents, your stock documents, or things your insurance, things like that, that you probably need today already. And it's not that hard, but it's to your point, people don't want to deal with that.
No, because when you started your company is maybe 2 people, 3 people,
Yeah,
right? So
yeah,
you have it on your drive or you have it on your file and it's under this name that maybe you couldn't find, right? It's like not a big deal. We can find it when we need it. That's the kind of mentality we have to switch and say, all right, let me just take a half day, put a podcast in, find all these things, give it to my operator to zhuzh and rename and make it really nice and centralize all these things. Because whenever we need it, I don't want to have to think about it. Or
yeah.
what I like to call like the if I get hit by a bus thing, if I get hit by a bus rule. If I get hit by a bus, you got everything you need to keep it rolling while I recover in the hospital. Like you got it going. That's a good little pro tip for the operators out there.
Yeah, I agree.
This has been so wonderful. I want to wrap up with some rapid fire questions about you as a human, just
Okay,
to bring you to light a little bit more. So I'm gonna shoot them your way, and then you just knock them down as they come. You ready?
sounds good.
Okay. First of all, what is your favorite part of the day?
Mornings. I'm a morning person, so I'm up and running at like 6 a.m. And that's, I don't know, feels good to wake up, start a new day. So that's my favorite part.
What book or audiobook are you currently listening to?
I'm finishing the biography of Elon Musk by Walt Isaacson, and it's been very interesting. I love biographies. I read all the books on Walter Isaacson, and yeah, it's been a pretty nice book.
What is the best purchase that you have made under $50?
I want to say tennis balls. I love to play tennis,
Oh,
and I don't purchase a lot of things. So that's why purchasing is not top of mind. And when I do, it's probably above $50. So that's why I would say, yeah, it's not obvious to me.
well, as a avid tennis player, is there a certain type of tennis ball brand that you would recommend?
I do use the Pan Championship is I'd say the one that you buy at Costco and big in bulk. That's the one I get.
Good to know when I get my Costco card. What is your favorite quote?
This one I have a few, but I would say fortune favors the prepared mind. So I do think the concept of luck, it's not really luck. Like, there are many things happen to people all the time. It's just if you're prepared, something that seems to be like luck is just aligning of different things. So
I like that flip on that quote too. I'm going to take that one. Next one is, what is something that makes you little kid happy?
little kid happy playing games, playing video game. I still do it.
Oh,
Did a lot growing up, still do it, and that brings the kid back on me.
what's your go-to game right now?
Right now, I mean, I have not had a lot of time to play games lately, but I've been playing this game called Polytopia, which is a phone game, so it's easy when you're at the airport waiting or something. I saw that on the Elon Musk book. Apparently, he's crazy about it, and I had never heard. I play other games of the same type. I love the strategy type games, so this is the one I spend probably 20 minutes a day playing when I'm tired to do other things.
Yeah, now I'm going to spend time doing that. Knowing what you know now, what advice would you give to your younger self in starting their career?
Take more risks. Be more aggressive. Do things faster. I think, yeah, I definitely took, even if it doesn't sound like, I took a very kind of risk averse path. I was a consultant. I went to business school. So I put myself in a position that it's kind of very de-risked. But in hindsight, I would have started doing startups at the age of 18 and skip a lot of other things.
That's good advice. Last one, which is, what would you like to be when you grow up?
I like to be a founder who had impact in the world. And, I can look at whatever I spend 16 hours a day working and say, they helped others succeed. It had impact in the world.
So if people are listening to this interview and they're like, oh my gosh, I want to stay in touch with what Matthias is doing, what Tint's up to, where can people find you and follow your journey?
LinkedIn is the easiest place. Again, if you want to talk with Tint, there's a website, tint.ai. One way or the other is going to get to me. But it's more like, of course, I'm LinkedIn very active, so it's a good place. And as far as I know, there's only Matheus Riolfi out there, so it should be easy to find me there.
We'll make sure to put it in the description as well so people can find you easily. Thank you so much. I feel like we did gymnastics through a million topics, which is my favorite. So I really appreciate your knowledge and being so generous with your experience.
Thank you so much, Erin. It was a pleasure speaking with you.
Secret Ops listeners, as always, thank you so much for listening. And please make sure to follow us with wherever you subscribe to your podcast. We are also on YouTube now, so if you are a visual learner like me, you can watch our conversation there. See you next time.